Test. We are on. I'm not hearing too much. Yeah? Can't hear. Okay, well, in that case, you can hear. Okay. I'd like to get started. And my name is Wesley Schrum. I'm Secretary of 4S. I'm not here to welcome you to the banquet. I'm just curious if anybody can hear back there. Not so much. You can hear up here, but back there people they seem to be drinking. I don't understand. Well, let me just clarify two issues. I know some people have had questions about this. Many of you know that East and 4S meet once every 4 years in Europe. Some of you don't know that the reason that we meet every 4 years here, well, you can see your name tag. We just give the country. And one of the reasons is we want to celebrate the Olympic spirit. And the other thing many people apparently haven't learned yet is that we meet in Europe to select the President of the United States. And we meet in Europe so that there's no question of it's not an inside job. The selection is made here. Now, I have to tell you, we've heard some complaints about the selection recently. We've heard some complaints about the last selection from various quarters. So we've tried to determine the reasons, and we think it was a software error. The webmaster is telling us that has been fixed, and this year the president will be legitimate. So I want you to think very carefully about this. And to continue the program, I want to introduce Christine Hine, the president of East.
Well, it's very ungallant to leave the mic quite so high after you've finished. Okay, well, usually at this point I stand up and I say that East does not do speeches. But I've kind of realised that every time I do that I'm making a speech, so I'm going to stop saying that and say that I will make a short speech. East doesn't do lots of ritual, it doesn't do lots of speeches, but I guess the one thing we do know how to do is to say our thank yous. And so first of all, on behalf of East, I would like to thank all of you for coming to this conference. East members and 4S members alike, new East and new 4S members, we'd very much like to welcome you. This conference may have been your first taste of the two societies, and we hope you'll stick with us for a long time. But I'd particularly like to thank those of you who have come to Europe for this conference in the face of unfavourable exchange rates. We really do appreciate the effort that you have made this time around. It's great to see you. There's a real distinctive intellectual flavour and buzz around a joint 4S East conference, and I'm just delighted that this one is buzzing the way that they do. And I guess the big reason that it's buzzing the way that they do is that we have a fabulous team of local organisers. We have a team who with grace and energy have addressed everything from how many cups of coffee to the great intellectual problems of the discipline. You've spanned that with style, and you've made it to sessions, and you've organised sessions, and I'm in awe of the kind of effort that you've made. So, the local organising team, Roland Ball, Tone, Zoider Indirac and Antoinette de Bon, we have a very small, tangible memory for you, so that when we've gone, you can think of us fondly, I hope. So maybe if I could just invite the three of you just to pop up here for a moment. So thank you so much. Okay, so I promised short, and that is my key jobs done. So now I believe the schedule is that I will now hand over to Roland. Roland, I hope this is not a surprise to you. No more. But I believe I'm now supposed to hand over to you.
Well, it does come as a surprise, I should say. Well, you know, I'm very good at short speeches, so the ones I was going to thank, actually, we are already, I guess he was in Wes's speech already. I think Steve should get an applause. Steve Coffey, who did all the very responsive and great work at the registration and those kind of things. So if he's over there, please give him an applause. The second, and this is someone, and I'm not sure where she is now, but there is someone, without her we really couldn't have got this off. Marije, there she is. Marije is really just great, and I think really for us, Andy should hire her for every meeting to come, because she's been so wonderful, and well, as I said, without her we couldn't have done anything. There's a couple of people who aren't here, who I should thank, with our Anna and Ines, our secretaries, and they did a great job. I also want to thank Wiebe for being, I think you were the guide for the first ever 4S East tour that was ever made, and I really, and I know from the people who went on the tour that they really enjoyed it, and I wish to thank you for that very much. And then I want to thank, as I said during my welcoming speech also, that this is not only a Rotterdam event, it's also a Netherlands event, and I hope that you have been able to go to some of the VTMC meetings that have been organized so well. So the sub-plenary yesterday, and some of the meetings that were there yesterday, who have been all organized by Karin Bijsterveld, and I think this has been really wonderful to have this as you know, a Dutch treat. And so I don't know where Karin is, but I hope she's here, and please give her an applause as well. Okay, and there I am. Probably I should give the word over now to the president of 4S, Mike Lynch.
Okay, we have a tradition of very enjoyable banquets at the joint meetings in horrible acoustics. So we've planned a short program awards for the 4S prizes. And but before we get to the prizes, I'd like to thank 3 members of our council who are outgoing and going out this year. Paul Wouters, is Paul here? I can't see too well here. Martina Mertz and Maureen McNeil. Again, I can't see too well here, but they read literally hundreds of books in the last 2 years with our 2 book prizes, and they've kindly enough agreed to stay on to help us in the next year for reasons that I will explain. I also would like to announce that we have some new members of council, and we have a new president-elect who will be the president of 4S following the 2009 meetings. Our new members of council are Rebecca Herzig, who's not here, Miwao Matsumoto, who may be here. Is Miwao here? And Needham Wakeford. Let's give them a round of applause for those 3. And our president-elect, I'm very happy to say, is Judy Weissman, who I know is here. Okay, I'm very pleased to be working with these people in the next year. Okay, now let's get to the prizes. We have 4 prizes. One is a paper prize for student papers, and we have 2 book prizes. One the Rachel Carson Prize, and the other the Fleck Prize. And we'll be announcing those shortly, but I'd like to use the opportunity now to announce that we have created yet another prize, and this will be a prize for the best published paper in a 3-year period, and we hope to award the first one of these prizes at the 2009 meetings. We are putting together a committee and a procedure at the moment, and we will be announcing on the website and in our circular techno-science about how that works, and I hope we will get plenty of papers submitted. And I'm very pleased to say that we are naming the award after David Edge, who was a president of the 4S, a Burnell Prize winner, and he was also the founding editor of Social Studies of Science. Barbara Edge, his spouse, is with us today. She traveled from Edinburgh to be with us, and I'm very happy that she's made it to Rotterdam to be here. Let's give her a hand. Okay. The first prize that we're going to announce is the Nicholas Mullins Award, and that will be announced by Gabrielle Hecht, and Gabrielle is here.
Okay, this year's Mullins Prize Committee consisted of Michelle Murphy, Stefan Timmermans, and myself. And the award goes to Jenna Burrell, then of the London School of Economics, for her excellent paper entitled Problematic Empowerment, West African Internet Scams as Grassroots Media Production. This paper is based on extensive ethnographic fieldwork in Accra in Ghana, where Burrell observed and talked with internet cafe users, owners, and operators. The paper explores the way internet fraud, particularly but not only the classic West African scam, figures as both narrative and practice amongst Ghanaian internet users. The committee was particularly taken with how this paper expands the purview of STS analysis through its fieldwork and its analysis of the multiple ironies of digital representation and its political implications. So, Jenna, congratulations.
I was told I was supposed to say something for like 2 minutes, and I won't take that much time, but this is a community that's produced so much work that I really admire, so I feel very encouraged. And I want to thank my thesis advisor, Don Slater, who's not here, but who was an excellent advisor and who looked at this work and gave me great feedback. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Paul Wouters will announce the Rachel Carson Prize, which goes to the best book in an area that is in social activism, politically relevant scholarship. Paul?
Okay, dear colleagues, the United States, to take a slightly more serious note perhaps, is the most nuclear bombed country in the world, having detonated nearly 1,000 nuclear devices within its own territorial borders. This is a quote from the winner of the Carson Prize of this year, and many of you are probably not aware of the fact nor of the emotional and political intensity that this history actually brings with it. The prize winner is a penetrating analysis of the history of the atomic bomb, and at the same time very poetic. It is, as Gabrielle Hecht in the Authors Meets Critics session mentioned today very aptly, an archaeology of the place of the bomb. It deals with the interactions between the nuclear industry and the Pueblo Indian communities, the Nuevo Mexican communities, and the local anti-nuclear activists. And if only for that, the book would already be a very strong candidate for the Carson Prize. Another quote: "The strange new intimacy of life in the nuclear age is often overlooked." And this quote is an indication of the fact that the book not only deals with the political and economic and military dimensions, but very intensely also with the emotional impact, actually the nuclear uncanniness of the bomb, both in its political, emotional, psychological and methodological dimensions. And I think this is the reason that the committee, consisting of Maureen, Martina and myself, you've seen us standing there a few minutes ago, were really totally overwhelmed by the book. We had many very good books in the competition for the Carson Prize, but we did not have any hesitations. So the Carson Prize is won by Joseph Masco with the book The Nuclear Borderlands, the Manhattan Project in Post-Cold War New Mexico. Joseph, if you could come to the floor.
It's always difficult to speak in an environment like this, but and we didn't know this guy at all. He really did it on himself.
Okay, here you are.
Thank you.
Well, sir.
Well, thank you, Paul, for today, which has been a dream of a very particular kind, to not only be honored for the work that I've been doing for over 10 years for the particular book project that we're talking about today, but also for meeting so many engaged scholars today who not only read the book, but thought carefully about it and engaged me with such sensitivity and clarity about both the theoretical dimensions of the book, but also its larger political project. So I'm absolutely thrilled to get the Carson Prize, and particularly thrilled to get the Carson Prize given the content of the book. Rachel Carson, of course, alerted us so many years ago to the mounting industrial consequences, environmental consequences of DDT, but also imagined her work as a certain kind of wake-up and a certain kind of invitation to inquiry. And I always thought that the Nuclear Borderlands as a project could be that. And it was really only till today that I think maybe it got a piece of that. And so I'm enormously grateful to the Society and the committee that chose the book. And with that, I will just thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you very much.
Our second book prize is the Ludwig Fleck Award, and this year's winner will be announced by Sergio Sismondo.
I, like many of you, spend many of my days in an office. Mine is in a 1960s building with windows that were encouraged to keep closed. Every now and then the season changes, heating changes to air conditioning, and then my ventilation system spews out a puff of fine dust that settles on piles of books and papers that cover my desk and all the other flat surfaces in my office. Water damage has created bulges in the wallpaper that look like lesions. There's a rumor that people, luckily on the other side of the building, get chronic illnesses more than one might expect. My building may be sick. Luckily for its dwellers, it does not have all of the normal etiologies and symptoms for sick building syndrome. This was one of the, but only one of the reasons why I was so happy to read Michelle Murphy's Sick Building Syndrome and the Problem of Uncertainty. This wonderful book traces the material and perceptual history of sick building syndrome. Buildings became sick after developments in architecture that made buildings flexible for multiple and changing occupants and organizational structures, after developments in ventilation engineering that created an indoor climate geared to a standardized worker, when office workers were regimented in new ways, and when the buildings were carpeted with new artificial materials. I was considering reading a passage from Michelle Murphy's book on the new artificial materials, but then I realized that you would just have eaten dinner and you probably didn't want to hear anything about that. But Michelle also wants to know how buildings came to be perceived as sick, how sick building syndrome was materialized. Thus, she leads us through efforts to reveal sickness through consciousness-raising methods taken from the women's health movement, through office workers' movements in the 1970s and 80s, with support from tobacco industry, a tobacco industry that was interested in multiplying the perceptibility of indoor toxins and multiple indoor toxins, and through popular epidemiology that clashed in its styles and findings with industrial toxicology. These narratives are wonderfully woven together to produce a novel study of the social production of perception and its limits. The book is theoretically and methodologically innovative, and its topic is fascinating. It is thus a very deserving winner of the Fleck Prize, and I'm happy to present it to Michelle Murphy.
Thank you, Sergio. Like Joe, I'm incredibly grateful and humbled by this award. And basically, I just want to thank 4S and East and the Science and Technology Studies community for not only being such acute and caring readers of the book, but for helping to incubate it over its long decade of gestation. And in particular, I want to thank the feminist technoscience studies community of 4S, as well as the ethic of allowing experiments in interdisciplinarity, which really, I think, made this book possible. So thank you very much. I'm incredibly grateful.
Our final award is the John Desmond Burnell Prize. This is our award for career achievement. It was started in 1981 when this society was about 5 years old, and it was the first meeting I happened to attend with less than 100 people registered. John Desmond Burnell, who died in 1971, was an X-ray crystallographer at Birkbeck College, University of London, who received his PhD from Cambridge. He's mentioned briefly in Watson's double helix as Rosalind Franklin moved to Burnell's lab after her miserable time at King's College, and apparently she was quite happy there in the few years that she had left in her life. Burnell was a very colorful character, strong political views, unconventional in many ways. His views on science were also unconventional for a notable scientist. One could say he was the un-Watson. He attended the 1931 History of Science meeting in which Boris Hessen delivered his Marxist account of Newton's science, and his book, Social Function of Science, established him as a socially conscious and activist scientist. Derek Price, who had worked in Burnell's group, was the first recipient, and he was followed in the next 2 years by Robert K. Merton and Thomas S. Kuhn. The list is on the 4S website if you wish to check it, and it is worth looking at. It's an interesting mix of individuals, some of whom we identify specifically with science and technology studies, and others of whom, like Mary Douglas and Joseph Needham, are better known for contributions to history, social theory, anthropology, and other fields we draw upon. The other members of the committee charged with selecting this year's Burnell Prize winner were Lucy Suchman, who was the chair of the committee, Susan Lee Starr, who was the 4S president at the time, Jane Somerton, and Viva Biker. It gives me great pleasure to announce this year's winner, Steve Woolgar. I've known Steve, it's hard to imagine this, but I've known him for 30 years. We were together for several years at Brunel University in the 1990s, along with Christine Hine, Alan Irwin, Ralph Schroeder, and many others in a very lively and interesting group of faculty and students. Steve is well known in 4S and East circles, so I needn't rehash his contributions, and I think many of you saw his performance today in the plenary session. Steve received his first degree, and it was a first, in engineering at Cambridge before going on to work with Michael Mulcahy for his PhD, also received at Cambridge. His dissertation and some of his early publications were a close analysis of the temporal and discursive organization of discovery accounts, focused on the discovery of pulsars by Anthony Hewish's team at Cambridge. At that time, he showed an attention to detail, skepticism about face value, just so stories, and an interesting knowledge of ethnomethodology. He then collaborated with Bruno Latour on Laboratory Life, the first book published from the wave of laboratory ethnographies in the late 1970s, and by far the most influential of those books. Perhaps it's the most influential books in social studies of science published in the last 30 years. Although Bruno Latour performed much of the on-site observation at Salk Laboratories in San Diego and is often given the lion's share of the credit for the book, I think it's fair to say that the conceptualization and much of the analysis of laboratory life bears the unmistakable traces of Steve Woolgar's hand. Laboratory Life was first published when Steve was still in his 20s and fresh out of graduate school. But he didn't rest on his laurels, as he went on to make major contributions to STS in several areas. He turned his vision to visualization in science, and then turned again and again and again to put reflexivity on the agenda. Later, he turned to technology and configured the user in a novel way, before transcending to virtual society, though always with a question mark. And most recently, he has promoted STS in relation to business and marketing. Adopting to his new milieu, I am told that he gives a mean grace in Latin, so he continually adopts to his environment. And as those who attended today's plenary can see, he has taken up mundane technology, but in a far from mundane way. Through these changes in topics, Steve established a consistent intellectual style, always probing, questioning, teasing out our tendencies to settle for conventional forms of social and natural explanation. His work is playful, ironic, refusing to allow the epistemological sleight of hand that dismisses naturalistic statements while authorizing other forms of explanation that are more palatable to this audience. While many of us prefer to take reflexivity in small doses, Steve doesn't let us off the hook. This is amusing to some, annoying to others, but always cleverly performed. This will be the 28th Burnell Prize. From time to time I hear half-serious talk that will eventually run out of truly worthy candidates for the award, and the Burnell Prize will become the Banal Prize. Those of us who have been on the prize committee can testify that the real difficulty is not that we've run out of worthy candidates, but that so many are still left, and there are more being generated all the time. It is a special pleasure to give this award to Steve Woolgar because of the achievements it recognizes are far from finished, and I fully anticipate a few more turns in the future. Steve?
Thanks so much, and it's really a huge honor to accept this prize, and I can only echo what Jenna said a few moments ago. It's a community which produces stunningly interesting, excellent work, and I'm really proud to be given a prize by that community. Now, I had prepared, of course, a long and eloquent speech, just in case that we broke with tradition and we weren't operating in terrible acoustics and people drinking and all the rest of it. And it would have been a wonderful speech, but I'm now going to cut it savagely and just give you the gist of it. I still haven't a clue what to say for my acceptance speech. Obviously it needs to be massively impressive, world-shattering, noble, announcing a huge breakthrough, distinguished, didactic, provocative, magisterial, memorable, and packed with erudite vocabulary. And yet it's got to be ironic, self-effacing, modest, charming, witty, reflexive, and above all, short. That's the challenge. And it's very tricky to manage that kind of tension. It's particularly tricky, of course, because many of us are experts in analysing, deconstructing, and generally being sceptical about acceptance speeches. Goffman's done it. Mike Mulcahy had a speech called A Black Day for the 4S. So the real problem is how to deconstruct the occasion without being disrespectful, how to celebrate the symbolic communal function without suggesting that anyone could have won the award. And of course, in giving these awards, it's not just a communal function, but we do some work in creating the identity of the winner. Who is the winner? Who exactly is getting the prize? This is something which has troubled me for longer than when I learned I was getting the prize. It was just, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago that I met somebody in the context of business and management studies, and I was introduced to him, and he said that he knew somebody of the exact same name who used to do all these wacky, ironic, constructivist, relativist, skeptical, reflexive things. So there's a wonderful confusion. What I love about SDS and why I'm so grateful to be part of this community is a number of reasons. It's difficult. SDS is dangerous, it's lively, it's provocative, it's deflationary. It takes treasured and revered concepts and ideas and makes them much less pretentious. It is full of surprises. It has a great capacity for awkwardness, causing trouble. STS as a vehicle is quite probably the very best one around for a much wider agenda of destabilizing, unsettling, provoking, disturbing, shaking, and so on. SDS turns up in the most unexpected places. I mean, it's a real privilege to be given an award that's named after John Desmond Bernal. I was just last week at the Museum of War Remnants in Ho Chi Minh City. Now, this is a wonderful museum, originally called the Museum of War Crimes and Atrocities Perpetrated by the American Warmongers. The politics have shifted more recently, so it's changed its name. It's now the Museum of War Remnants. It's a spectacular place, and one centerpiece exhibit is the framed 1965 declaration by the chair of the World Peace Committee about the true absurdity of the American war. The signatory is none other than Professor J. Bernal. SDS has a wonderful capacity for reinventing itself. It's why I like all those turns that Mike talked about. All the turns do different topics, the successive symmetries. They're very special. And above all, what I like about SDS is it is fun. And of course, this is serious fun. It is serious unseriousness. So, I'm not going to log on for long, but I do want to make some specific thanks, and in particular I want to thank local colleagues that I've had the pleasure of working with, most recently at Oxford. I want to mention and thank Dan, Javier, Christian, Chris, Tarek, Catalina, Elena, Peter. Before that at Brunel, especially I'd like to thank Jeff Cooper, Chris Hine, Mike Lynch, Alan Owen. And of course it's very special that Chris and Mike are in the positions they are today. I don't know if you realise it, but that for a short time in the 1990s, Brunel was the Ellis Island for STS immigrants. Situated just a short way away from Heathrow, it accepted refugees and immigrants from the bizarre turns of the tenure system in the United States, from other disciplines that weren't quite in the SDS. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. They came to Brunel. Mike Lynch and Christine Hine were among those immigrants, refugee arrivals at Brunel in the 1990s, both of whom, as energetic immigrants, we have now seen have risen to the dizzy height of president. Even immigrants can become presidents in SDS. And finally, I can't end without saying a word of thanks to Bruno. Bruno, who invited me to work with him on the Salk Institute study, and who very generously allowed me to mess with what was originally supposed to be a study of the careers of great scientists. SDS has a terrific future. 4S and EAST are major institutions for helping SDS implement that future. I am delighted and grateful to be part of it. Thank you very much.
Okay, it's time to close the meeting. There will be dessert and coffee served, and I do believe and hope desperately that the bar is still open. One last announcement. I hope to see all and more of you at the next meeting in Washington, D.C., October 28th, November 1st, and then the following year, August 26th to 28th in Tokyo, Japan. Thank you very much for coming and for listening to us through all of this din, and you can go back to eating, drinking, and merriment. And once again, thanks to the organizers for doing a fantastic job.
It's almost like the Academy Awards. You'll see what I did. I followed him up the stairs to the presenter. I think it's fun. I think it's very fun. We have just a much harder. Well, no, it would look bad if you were ahead of time. Thing was 44 minutes. So what happened? The channel was good. You know what? I didn't even make the connection. I did not make the connection. But the irony is very bad. Easy internet on it. Now, she did buy internet. What was it? And I have a copy of that. And I asked her for the paper, but I told you. Oh, that's a beautiful shot. I got Steve's flash. I got Steve. You mentioned Steve? Mike? Did you see anybody that we should shoot? Like anybody that would be interested? I'm not seeing a lot of I'm going to talk to Trevor because Trevor was the one who said it. Yeah, but you got to remind Trevor of that. Whereas it doesn't expensive. Whereas it was not as expensive. Hey, Rick, you know, Harry was kind of interested in doing an interview. And, you know, we did our interview with Sheila today, Harry Collins. And I know, I told him, look, you know, we've done it before, but